year when we return.
Welcome to the Devy Devotional Podcast, a show devoted to college prospect evaluation with a fantasy football focus. With your hosts, John Arrington, Aaron Wilcox, and Andy Starr. This podcast brings you actionable strategies and player-driven analysis for your Devy, C2C, and Dynasty leagues. Let's dive in.
Let's dive into the new year. Welcome into the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I am your host, John Arrington, joined as always by Aaron Wilcox. Unfortunately, not joined by Andy Starr today. He is under the weather. Some kind of bug took over his house, and he thought he had avoided it, but eventually it caught him as well. So he will not be joining us today. And we're doing a rare, extremely rare, since we've never actually done it before, noon recording of the Devy Devotional. We normally record at night. Things just didn't work out last night, and so here we are recording on the 31st of December, 2025 at noon for the listeners. And we wanted to get one last pod. I know it seems kind of like arbitrary or stupid or whatever, but I didn't want to do like switch over to the rookies until next year. I didn't, and so I wanted to do one last pod before we did that full on switch over to that area, into that, like, that focus, because that's all we're going to be talking about for the next, what, 4, 5, 6 months. Figured let's do one last pod. Why don't we talk about our resolutions, what we want to do a little differently next year, what we want to change about our process, what we want to change about really anything. It could be life, it could be whatever. Let's just talk it out. But first, obviously, we have to check in with the new father. Aaron, how's everything going with the baby, and how are you doing as well?
Yeah, things are well. Things are well. Happy. I'm looking forward to New Year's here, and yeah, nothing too new. Just surviving, doing as well as we can, and excited to talk about these topics here. I mean, it's always fun to get some ideas of where can I improve or what can I continue working towards into the new year, whether it's our process, whether it's our drafting, our league management, maybe what we can provide as a podcast. So, yes, always excited to talk with you. We are missing Andy. I hope he feels better with whatever bug he's got going on, but we'll get him next time.
Absolutely. I am actually upset that Andy's not here, because one thing I wanted to cover on this pod, and I know you guys don't care about our pod or our leagues and things all that much, but Andy and I both did something that I thought was pretty cool, and the fact that we literally like matched each other tit for tat was just unbelievable to me. And so I wanted Andy to be here, but he's not. So Andy and I both took over an orphan this year. Different orphans, different leagues, different people, different owners, different everything. So like, but we each individually took over an orphan in that same year, and they were both in C2C leagues. In that same year, we both won one side's championship and got second place on the other side's championship. And it's kind of unbelievable to be like, hey, how does that even happen? But B, how does it happen to both of us? It just kind of blows my mind. So Andy ended up getting the campus2canton.com League of Record championship on the NFL side, and he also got the second place on the campus side. So he had a really good year for an orphan that he took over. And then I did the same thing in another league called Krampus to Campus league, and I took that over, and I got first place on the campus side, and then I got second place. I lost by 3 points, unfortunately, on the NFL side. I needed like one more catch from Colby Parkinson, and or I needed Jalen Hurts to score more than 3 points, and I could have won that ship.
Oh man, well done to both of you with those championships and taking over. And an orphan, a team like that, sometimes can be challenging to turn it around right away, especially in a C2C format where it's rebuilding through your campus side, and that rebuilding process sometimes can take years. So nice job getting it right away. And I'm also pretty happy with how things shaped up in my leagues. The Devy University League, which I believe Andy, did he win both sides
He,
last
y-
year?
yep.
I was able to win both sides in there this year, and that's the league that Andy's in, you're in, a bunch of listeners, and yes, it's a lot of fun. So
If the
I
pressure wasn't on before for me, I don't know, man. The pressure is on. If I don't at least win one side next year, then I'm in rough shape.
Yes, but yeah. Anyways, it's fun having the NFL sides wrap up. I don't know if that'll be part of the New Year's resolutions here. We certainly can, because this podcast, yes, we focus so much on the college players, the prospects themselves, but we also like to sprinkle in a little bit of insight for NFL teams, for that side, because that's such an important side when you're playing Devy, when you're playing Campus to Canton, is still, how do these guys translate to the pros? How do you manage that side of the roster too?
Absolutely. Well, it's the end of the year, beginning of a new year, and I felt like it wouldn't be right to send off the 2025 and start the new year without a surprise and without guess the guy. Let's guess the guy. Aaron is chuckling because he had no idea that this was coming. But it is technically the off season now, so it's time to start our guess the guy uh, tournament here. And so I figured, why not do it? Why not start it off right this year or this on this pod. And so here we are. Guess the guy. If you don't remember, because it's been a little bit since we've done it, we did it all throughout the last off season. We give a basically Aaron's going to try and guess who this player is. We give a bunch of clues throughout, and obviously as each clue is given, it gets a little easier to figure out who it is, and then you of course get less points depending on how many rounds it takes you to get it. So why don't we start with your random guess here, Aaron? Guess the guy.
I will guess Ahmad Hardy, Missouri running back.
Ooh, I just listened to some people bashing Ahmad Hardy on a podcast. I think it was yesterday, saying how they don't believe in him. Still, that kind of blows my mind. But it is not Ahmad Hardy. In fact, it is a wide receiver.
It is a wide receiver. For my wide receiver guess, I'm gonna go with, and these are returning guys, or assuming returning, or some of these guys that are
Just to
eligible for.
just to make it easier, let's say anyone who played college football this year, but obviously sticking with the rules of it has to be a top 75 guy and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Mario Craver, Texas A&M wide receiver.
Ooh, I love me some Mario Craver. I think he came back to health at the end of the season here, but it is not Mario Craver. His market share might have rivaled Craver's. I have to look at what Craver's was when it was all said and done, because obviously he started off hot, but then he kind of fell off there in the middle. This player had a 29.85% market share in 2025.
Ooh, I'm gonna go KJ Duff, Rutgers wide receiver.
Ooh, I like that guess, and I want to see where Duff was for that, because he had his market share was I think he was at 34%. Yeah, 33.95%. So that was a good guess. And actually, I think that he is we've discussed him recently. Like, I think he's a very underrated player just because people are worried that he's 1 inch taller than he's supposed to be or whatever. And I you know me, I don't get into all that. Like, is he good or is he not good? So, no, it is not KJ Duff. In fact, it is because he is a third year player, not a KJ Duff's what a
So,
second year
so to
player, I
be
believe.
clear, he's already finished his third year, going into fourth year.
He just finished his third year in college.
Okay, gotcha. Just finished the third year in college. I'm gonna go with Deuce Robinson, Florida State wide receiver.
Another player who's not getting nearly enough love, but not the player that I chose. In fact, you know how Aaron is part of the CampusCanton.com's Devy rankings and stuff, and he always has to fight to like get certain people thrown into the Devy ranks and thrown into the Devy guide and all that kind of stuff. I'm doing the same thing at DLF right now, where I'm trying to get Deuce Robinson thrown into their top 24 because they don't want to do it. And I'm like, guys, we got to do this. Now, I can't guarantee he's coming out this year, but the second we have that information, I think we have to have him in our top 24. And unfortunately, I'm fighting against people who do not want to do that. So we'll see what happens there, but not Deuce Robinson. Mostly because it is a Big 12 player and not an ACC player. Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. So, Big 12 player going into their fourth season if they want it. Doesn't mean that they need to. I don't know. See, part of the guess the guy strategy, if for people who are new listeners or just refreshing on this, sometimes we do mix in guys that we like. For example, guys that we're either optimistic or maybe bigger fans of. It's not always the case, right? But that will bias me a little bit of who I am selecting, and I'm going to go with Jace Brown, the Kansas State wide receiver, who is going into his fourth year now.
Ding, ding, ding. It is Jace Brown. Good job.
Thanks.
Uh, a, Another player, I mean, this is like the theme of the day. Another player who's just underrated and not getting enough love. I guess, we thought that he could have possibly come out, but obviously it's not a shock that he's going to enter the transfer portal and try to go put together some solid season somewhere else because I mean, 30% market share, it just, I mean, the yards per reception, the touchdowns, the everything that you're looking for, except for he just doesn't have a great QB. And so, he really just needs to go somewhere where he can like truly showcase, who he is. And I think, we've seen the team knows that he's the best player there. It's just that the quarterback can't really get him the ball. So I love me some Jace Brown. I can't wait to find out where he ends up, and hopefully he can put together a really solid senior year, and we can be talking about him at the top end of the next class, or at least in the mix in the next class. Obviously, it's a very coveted class, so we'll have to see where he finishes. But what do you think of Jace now that he's finished his junior year?
Yes, I am still a Jace Brown fan. I guess I have some concerns there with what injury he was dealing with. I think it was two separate ones that really hampered him this season. And like you said, the quarterback play was not great, especially early on in the year. And then there was just some inconsistency from Jace, but that's not all on him. Obviously, he has commanded a large share of the offense. He's a versatile playmaker. He's produced early in his career. He's continued to be a good player in college football. I was curious if he would ultimately transfer and go to like a big time program. They could use him at USC or some other school that would get him even potentially earlier draft capital. But for now, I guess we'll see where he ends up ultimately. But Jace Brown is still a viable player for Devy purposes, for eventual NFL draft purposes. I'm looking at my rankings here now. He is still in my top 12, just barely hanging on. And when guys leave from this class, that will definitely vault him up even a little bit more. So, yes, still a guy I'm optimistic about.
You love to see it. Well, nice job on the surprise guess the guy. You actually did better than than we normally do, so that worked out pretty well. You can get yourself a solid what 2 points? Is that what it is to start the year off? That's
Yeah, I can't remember because we do conference, then there's team, and then there's the name rhyme. And it sounds like, I think from last year, all of us were able to, nobody got 0 points. So would that be a three or is that a two?
I think it's a three actually. I think you get a three for conference because normally it was you'd get a two for the team and then the name rhyme. You better get it at that point. So
Right, right. Okay, sweet.
yeah, good job. All right, 3 points for that. But that is enough of games. Why don't we dive into Debbie? Alrighty, it's that time of year, time for everyone to do their New Year's resolutions, and we are no different. We're going to be doing it for fantasy football purposes for the most part, for C2C, Devy leagues, all that kind of stuff. Aaron, I know you had some that you were really excited about. We actually did get a couple from Andy as well. So we'll, even though he's not here, he's always here in spirit, and we will go over a couple of his as well. And then obviously I have a couple of my own. But Aaron, would you like to start us off here with your first New Year's resolution?
Sure thing. My first New Year's resolution is that I will be more selective in the transfers that I draft in my college football drafts. And this is something that I had discussed maybe a few months ago now. It wasn't that long ago, I guess, on the podcast, but ultimately there were several guys this year that just did not pan out. They were busts. So Hudson Clement, Eric Rivers, Jaden Thomas, or Javen Thomas, and there was others too that I guess are maybe not coming to mind right now. But and they were highly anticipated because of either smaller previous sample sizes or breakouts at lower levels of competition. But I thought about, how can I actually put that into action? Because it's great to say, okay, yeah, I'll be selective. How am I going to be selective? What precautions should we take when we are ultimately, I guess, looking to draft these guys or invest and trade for them, whatever the case is? And so, how can we avoid this? Well, I've really looked into it, and young players, especially freshmen who broke out as freshmen and young players and then transferred, whether it's transferred just to a different school or transferred up in competition level, they're the more lucrative investments. Think of the Ahmad Hardys, the Fluff Bothwells, the Darian Mensah. I know he was a redshirt freshman, but for quarterback, I think that's even more passable. And there's other guys too. I mean, and go deeper down the list, you'll find some wide receivers. You'll find guys who, if they excelled early on in their careers and then transferred, that's great. If these guys, they're not breaking out till their fourth year and then they're trying to transfer up, that hit rate just seems to be lower, at least from the recent examples that we can see out there. And you have to squint a little bit more to see how they project. So I think it'll be interesting. I know he's a redshirt freshman, or actually he might just be a second year player in general, but what's his name coming out of North Texas, is it Wyatt Young, going to um, well, wherever he ends up, I guess he's in the transfer portal. He might be Oklahoma State, but I assume he's transferring up in level of competition. That's another guy I'm kind of excited for to a degree. But again, it wasn't a true freshman breakout, though he played well as a true freshman. So that's just one example. And we're going to find out ultimately who transfers. We don't have that full list right now. We have some of the guys who put their name into the portal, but we don't know where they're ending up or committing any of that yet. So we will cover that on the podcast this season. But that's just my New Year's resolution: be selective, try to avoid some of the misses that took place over the last year or two.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. And I've definitely felt the same way, throughout the season, just looking at some of the misses, and it was like, you know what? It's not even like some of these players were bad, but even sometimes when it does work, like you mentioned, who's the guy from Illinois that you mentioned?
Oh,
Hudson
Hudson
Clement.
Clement. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you mentioned all right. So like, yeah, Clement was a slow roll and every the slow burn, but like, not that he was even an amazing game or anything. But guess who led them in receiving in their bowl game this past week? Hudson Clement. Like, so sometimes it's not even that it doesn't work out. It's just sometimes it takes an extra year or at least a half a year or whatever. But I'm trying to think, like, have there been any transfers in the recent past that have like really truly worked out? Like, oh my god, this guy's amazing. I mean, thinking back, there were some high name transfers from last season. um all the guys that ended up going to LSU, Emmett Mosley at Texas, like Barry and Brown at LSU. Trying to think, but there's so many players that transferred. There were big name players, and we all got all
Yeah.
excited about them. And I mean, have any of them really worked out, or can you think of any that have?
Yeah, right, right. Because the Evan Stewart, I mean, that's maybe injury related, but he hasn't worked out. Isaiah Bond didn't truly work out, right? I mean, flashed, but Quinshon Judkins, I think. Now I know he got injured at the NFL level, but he definitely worked out. You could
Well,
say
sure.
getting there. But yeah, I mean, you go down the list and it's like, yeah, a lot of flops, a lot of questionable marks there. Even higher end guys, like we liked Damian Martinez, Trevor Etienne to a certain degree at various points, and they just even didn't work out. So yeah, I guess there is something to be said about these guys transferring. Even the Matthew Goldens, like he's kind of been a flop, right? I mean, and we weren't really high on him on this podcast, but he's a guy who rose to the first round, late first round of rookie drafts in
Yep.
dynasty leagues. And, that was, we thought excessive, but it doesn't really matter. Ultimately, he was another guy who transferred. So you're right. I guess we are realizing that maybe less and less of those guys are hitting traditionally, but the new transfer portal, the NIL era, it's different. So I can't say with any sort of certainty if that's going to be predictable going forwards, but it could be more of a red flag. You're right, more of a pause that we should take investing in these guys.
It scares me for Cam Coleman. uh
Ooh.
like, the player that we
Nick
love.
Marsh.
Yeah, Nick Marsh. Man, I'm a little worried because like none of and maybe it's more for wide receivers because like we have seen some other players like you said, Quinshon Judkins, Justice Haynes. Like we definitely can't say that Haynes is going to be a stud, but I feel like with the running back position, maybe it's not as big of a deal. But and with the QBs, like we've seen some players be able to, like Fernando Mendoza, obviously transferred over to Indiana and was able to really take a step forward. Jackson Dart transferring over from USC was able to take a step forward. Even Spencer Rattler, like obviously nothing special or anything like that, but transfers over to South Carolina, gets drafted in the NFL and started games. So like
Yeah.
maybe for the QB and the running backs, it's not as big of a deal. But I might just be out on wide receivers that are transferring from now on. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, the wide receiver is definitely dicey. I mean, we kind of like what Jeremy Bernard did for the most part going into Alabama as a
Yeah.
transfer, but I mean, it wasn't like a blow up like stardom
Deuce,
role. It was
Deuce
solid.
Robinson is probably the best one that I can think of.
Mario
Um,
Craver,
oh yeah, yeah, that's
he's
true.
been
So
good there.
I don't know.
Casey Concepcion.
Maybe there's some recency bias or something in there, but we just have to see if those guys actually hit in the NFL because I can't think of too many that have like truly transferred and then hit in the NFL. But maybe I just have a terrible memory, which is probably true. Um, but yeah, that was definitely one that I wanted to touch on as well with the transfers because I definitely pushed the transfer guys up a little too much. It was also an ambiguous year; like there was not a lot of proven talent or anything, so it was like, oh, this guy's going to a solid spot. Like, let's get excited about him. And and I think my whole thing has always been trying to stay unbiased and do things across the board and not just to one individual player or whatever. But I really do think I'm going to build in like a small, oh, this player transferred discount because you're going into a completely new situation. You're going into a complete unknown for the most part. And once again, I mean, we've seen so many players transfer and then not become anything that I think at this point I kind of have to, in this new world, at least knock people a little bit so that I don't get overly excited about the Hudson Clements and the players like that.
Yeah, and that's fair. You typically will bump them up, for example, if they're playing for an SEC team versus a G5 team, or it could be other conferences. But
Hmm.
you give them a nice bump because, yeah, they're playing at a higher level of competition. Maybe it's just not even giving them that bump until they prove it at that level of competition. I don't know how much you can manipulate or tweak that, but yeah,
Yeah.
something like that I think is fair.
Yeah, I'm gonna figure something out because like I don't want to completely I don't want it to be a death knell either, but I just want, like you said, I want people to, or players to prove themselves, so that I don't take Hudson commit in the fourth, or or Javian Thomas. I took a lot of Javian Thomas this year, and I don't even know it was his fault. That team was terrible, but once again, it's going into an unknown. That's the whole point. It's not just because they're transferring that they're bad, but it's going into unknowns of where do they end up, what happens, that kind of thing. So it's like as soon as they enter the transfer portal, I almost just say, okay, we're knocking them down a little bit. Even once again, Cam Coleman. Maybe if you knock everyone down 5%, it's not going to kill Cam Coleman or anything. But like you just say, hey, there's a little bit of unknown that there really wasn't before.
Yeah, and going back to I guess my other point of if they broke out early in their career, like we can kind of avoid those potential flops or busts or whatever you want to say because hey, they've been doing it from a young age. Like they've been pretty
Yeah.
dominant versus the guys who just haven't done it yet. That's why they're transferring because they were blocked at Texas, they were blocked at
Right.
XYZ school. Well, we know that those guys were probably just not good enough to get on the field.
Yeah, that makes sense too. But that is enough about that one. Well, I guess why don't we do one of Andy's and then we'll do mine after that. Andy had said, well, he said just win, baby. That's it. So I'm guessing, I'm guessing don't be afraid to, make trades and do things of that nature to go all in and like winning the championship matter. It's hilarious. I in one of my leagues, I won. I was just looking because I'm like, I don't remember the last time I won the league, but I've been in the championship game like 4 out of the last 5 years. But then I looked at the actual league and I didn't win the championship. The last time I won the championship was 2021. And so like if you actually look at the at the league history, it barely shows my name, and yet I've been in the championship 4 out of the last 5 years. Like that kind of sucks. So it's like you got to just win, baby, because like otherwise you get completely written out of history.
That's true. I so many years when I was playing more exclusively dynasty leagues, I was really focused on always a young team,
Mhm.
always having that retooling, and I still like to retool every year. Right, I don't love these teams that just fall apart, and then I truly have to start from the bottom up again. But
Right.
I guess I am appreciating more and more like what do the Derrick Henrys bring? Well, you can trade them away and get like a fourth in a supplemental draft, sure, or you could just win your league by just hanging on to a couple of those guys. So I can appreciate it at times. If you can't get a nice return, you can't get a high end player, just letting them die on your roster and produce till the end. People have been doing that for years with Travis Kelsey and other players. So I definitely appreciate that. Like Andy said, just win, baby. Andy also said, don't be afraid to draft CFF only players in the middle to late rounds of supplemental drafts. So that's him saying, like, don't be afraid to just win, baby, on the college side and get some college scorers, even if you're taking a hit on their Devy prospects. And we've seen some of those guys we think are CFF only, but at the end of the day, they turn out to be some borderline Devy assets too. So you're thinking of guys like maybe Danny Scudero, or I'm trying to go down the list of Ahmad Hardy. When you picked him up, you probably thought, hey, he's a low level of competition, but he's a freshman in college who's going off and scoring. I'll pick him up for CFF only purposes. Well, he's turned into a Devy asset, and there's many other guys that we could probably list off who are more on that CFF side who can turn into true NFL prospects. I'm thinking like Caleb Hawkins even too, who is just the talk of the CFF community this season for North Texas, and we'll see where he ends up. But he should be very productive when he transfers up in competition too, I would think.
Yeah, and that kind of goes along with the whole transferring thing and everything is trying to figure out when to properly attack these players. When do you properly attack the transfer player? When do you properly attract the CFF only player, and that kind of thing? And when do you go for the freshman recruits? And that's really when I first got into this, and I started doing all the research, I realized how few freshman recruits actually hit, and the hit rates are so terrible. And at the time, there seemed to be more. Maybe it was just because there weren't as many analysts. Maybe there weren't as many people playing C2C. I don't really know what the answer was, but or maybe it was just because of COVID, honestly. But there seemed to be more players that you could fill those spots in with. As you're going along, and you're like, oh, I can throw this guy and I can draft this guy. I don't need to draft that freshman that has a 12% hit rate. Like or whatever it might be. And with the CFF guys, it's like, okay, well, he has a 0% hit rate, but he could win me my league. And so it's trying to figure out, because now, even though I still know the hit rates on those freshman recruits aren't great, and even though I know obviously I'm not going to get, most of the time you're not going to get the NFL, like Aaron said, you do every once in a while. You do get the guys, your Bajal Tutins and your Cam Scadavoos, and you do get these guys that end up becoming NFL viable and Devy viable, even if you consider it a complete zero. If it helps you win on the campus side, then obviously it's still worth it. And so that's kind of like one of my goals as well, is trying to really, I don't know if it's research or just thinking it through or whatever, is like, when is it the right time to do this, make this pick? Because I can tell you, using ADP and things that has never been my friend, because anytime I try to use like any kind of ADP or how is the consensus feeling or whatever, it always completely screws me, because like a guy will go 3 rounds earlier than I thought he was going to go, because C2C and Devy ADP really means nothing. So like it's trying to figure out when to make those moves, when to switch from one thing to another. That is kind of one of my resolutions as well, is just trying to figure out how to properly do that, and when is the right time to do it.
That's all fair, John. Do you have more New Year's resolutions, more ideas for us, for the listeners?
I do. And actually, as you were saying that, my mind just went completely blank. But
I
I
can go
had
with one
one.
too.
It was a good one. Okay, you go ahead and get one, because literally I have one on the tip of my tongue, and then the second you asked me, I completely lost it as I was reading something from my boss at DLF.
Oh yeah, no, you are good. So one of the things this year that I just want to be continue to do is be confident in my analysis, identifying, players with talent, and improving, just remaining strong in players that I really believe in at the end of the day. We have to put faith in sometimes that high end talent, and knowing that these players are going to develop and take that next step or improve. And at the end of the day, staying rational and selling or pivoting when needed is still key. So there's still that context, but at the end of the day, I don't want to just go down an easy route and just kind of fold over when there's opposing opinions, though it's easy to do. I don't want to break down with time despite, disagreements. It's okay to disagree. I think that's what makes this podcast fun at times. We do have disagreements on players and that banter, and that's okay, because ultimately, if we just always agreed, well, I guess that's just not the best content. And I think disagreements sharpen us. It makes us better as far as our analysis goes. And ultimately, the people listening, they're not always going to agree with us either. So it's nice to have that variety of views and different ways to come to these conclusions on who is good, who's bad, whatever the case is. And so I guess I'll just use a couple examples, because I know that might sound a little bit vague, but I liked Jeremiah Love a lot coming out of high school. I really liked him even into his freshman season. And it wasn't that special of a freshman season, but I always liked the talent and staying strong on that guy. I weakened a little bit, not fully moving off him or anything like that, but that is something where it's like, got to stay strong with some of those guys who really did not have the strongest freshman seasons, but where I really believe in that talent. I think another case, now we're seeing him further down the line here, is a Luther Burden, actually, who I liked him coming into college and his freshman season and all those things. And, understandably, we had to pump the brakes along the way, especially when his value kind of skyrocketed. But I still liked him as like a top five type of Devy wide receiver at many points there, and we're finally seeing some life. And it's been a little bit of a roller coaster because obviously he's been the butt of some jokes on the podcast here, but there was a point post draft where I was pretty high on him, and I'm going to play a clip here. This is just something to kind of remind myself, and it can be a little victory lap for the podcast here, or whatever the case is, but just to kind of remind myself to like stay strong with these things, don't fade them, because I ended up trading Luther Burden here in a couple dynasty leagues, probably too low this season. So that was earlier on in the season when he was struggling. But here's that clip I was going to play.
Just couldn't disagree more, because Luther Burden, he landed in a great spot as far as the coach goes too, because there's lots of systems where I'm like, I don't know if they could get the most out of a player. And I think that Ben Johnson picking Luther Burden as the weapon in the offense, I think that's actually a bigger tell. You're talking about like DJ Moore extension or last year's draft picks before he was there as a coach. Now he's saying, and that whole team, the front office, owner, all GM, they're saying we need a Luther Burden in our offense, and this is the guy that they want for the future there in Chicago. So I'm seeing it as
they needed a Colston Loveland, not a Luther Burden. They said they needed a Colston Loveland in the offense.
Yeah, I mean, Colston Loveland is a great tight end. There's no doubt about that. And we should be excited for that pick, and we should be excited overall for the offense. If we are getting some upgrades at all these different positions for the Bears, unfortunately not at the running back position. I wish they would have addressed that maybe in the draft. But we're seeing this offense continue to rise, and we want offenses that are going to be potent. Just like how the Lions have continued to build up their offense, it became a great machine where they could actually have a tight end who was very productive, plus a wide receiver one in Amon-Ra St. Brown, and even a Jameson Williams finally step up as that offense got humming. So I think it won't take too long for Chicago to get humming. Just couldn't disagree more.
Yeah, so that was just one example of it's okay to have differing opinions here, and I think that also liking Loveland, that was something we talked about too. Post draft, even people were moving Warren ahead. We're like, really just trust in that talent at the end of the day. It was easy to maybe say, okay, we were wrong on Loveland early season and say Warren's way better, whatever the case is. We're seeing that long term, that might not be the case here, right? Colston Loveland really showing some things. So I think that's another thing that we hit on well. Or like Andy and John with Travion Henderson, like we never even said Genty was bad. It's just that Travion Henderson wasn't being respected, and we didn't lose faith in Travion. I think it's really neat that we kept that, and then, of course, we see the breakout. We see some profits coming from that. So those are some examples of where we've maybe held strong when there's been differing opinions, or things that we got to continue to work at for sure too. Oh, sorry, muted.
I have no issues with with sticking to your guns and being strong with your takes. I think it's just like I was talking to Eric at DLF, and he's basically in charge of everything. And I was saying, hey, I'm not the guy for your consensus takes because I generally go against consensus, but it works a lot. And he was like, hey, I don't mind bold as long as it's not bold just to get clicks and stuff like that. Because if you have anything to back it up, then go for it. But if it's just to get clicks, that's not us. Like that's not what we're trying to do here. And that's how I feel about us in our pod. The Devy Devotional. It's like we're not bold just to get clicks. We're not, and we do differ in opinions, and but there's also a lot of times where we're all in consensus and we go no, yeah, this guy's not good or this guy's really good, but when. And even like with Luther Burden, I'm still out. Like I obviously like he had a great game, but what did that great game take? It took Roma Dunze being out. It took DJ Moore having the flu and clearly not being 100%. We also saw Roma Dunze have some unbelievable games at the beginning of the year. And, how do people feel about him now? Like just because he was injured and missed some time and things like that. We've also seen Colston Loveland become a pretty damn good tight end, and hopefully he's young and he can even grow even more from there. So, I can probably say, well, I can definitely say like me being 100% out on Luther Burden was wrong because obviously he has value and he has he has value that you can actually use in NFL or in dynasty leagues. So right there, like just being completely out, of course, I'm not able to take advantage of that value or anything like that right now, even though I would love to be able to. But at the same time, like I'm still kind of, I'm definitely not leaning towards like, oh my God, he's all of a sudden a stud. But you were always higher on him than I was, and I think higher than Andy was as well. And obviously, you can say, "Hey, but we don't know yet. But he could be a stud," and that kind of thing. So, I mean, we don't have that answer yet. But if he ends up being some absolute stud in a year or so, you can say, "Hey, John, you remember when you were completely out on Luther Burden?" That kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't say any of this with the purpose or intention of victory lapping because, like you said, we don't
No.
know ultimately is that going to keep up X, Y, or Z outcome for a guy like Luther Burden, but just more
Yeah.
so as giving that example of I traded him away in a couple of spots because I started to maybe not believe, right? I was like, you know what? Maybe all this talk, he is kind of a bust, right? We're not seeing that, but we need to. I can almost morph this into this New Year's resolution, a separate resolution. We got to remain patient for rookie wide receivers because some
Mhm.
get it right away, but others take the whole season. I mean, high
Yep.
end guys like Justin Jefferson, they take weeks to even quote unquote earn a starting role or really earn a lot of targets. There's learning curves for guys like Jackson Smith and Jigba, who took this year to become like an elite producer. Amon-Ra St. Brown, it took until week 13 his rookie season to really start taking off. And if you see through the years, Devonte Adams and other guys, kind of a slow progression. But obviously, there's signs there. We have to do a good job evaluating for the prospects, make sure that there's talent there. But then just remain patient when they are breaking out onto the NFL side because it's easy to sell low. So low on Luther Burden, so low on Jaden Higgins, the Houston wide receiver this season as well. And I don't even know if we're going to have like high expectations for him. I don't know if he's ever going to be like a wide receiver one, but as a
He's
promising
flashed
enough
though.
guy. Yeah,
Yeah,
he's
he's
flashed for sure.
flashed, and
Yeah.
even recently, yeah, that's a great, and like Trey Harris, like he has, like think about how crowded that wide receiver core is, but yet he went from a player who wasn't even on the field at the beginning of the year, to at least being on the field and running routes, and he actually led the team in receiving. I want to say like 2 out of the last 3 weeks or 3 out of the last 4 weeks or something like that. And I mean, none of them were doing well because they couldn't really throw the ball that much. So it wasn't, I'm not saying, oh my God, he had, 8 catches for 200 yards or anything like that. But leading the team in receiving is leading the team in receiving. And so, there's still hope. And now if Keenan Allen moves on, if they figure out that offense and the offensive line gets healthy, all next thing you know, now Trey Harris is a stud. So yeah, I definitely think sticking to your guns, especially even through the first year of these rookies, is so important. Look at Drake May as a QB example. He wasn't absolutely insane in year one or anything like that, and now there's talks of him being the QB1 in Dynasty. So and he doesn't even have any like true studs. I mean, we love Stephon Diggs, but the guy's 32 coming off an ACL tear. Like there he doesn't even have any true studs that he's like throwing to or working with there. So just imagine if they get everything clicking and they get like an actual stud in there, does he really even take another step forward? And so, yeah, I think being patient with your rookies is really important, and that works for both ways. If you're higher on a guy or if you're lower on a guy, it can work both ways. Just don't be scared of it. And that kind of leans into my next resolution. There's one I couldn't think of a minute ago, but I got it back. And when I created FreshBeth, the recruit process, I created it just so I could have an idea of what I was talking about. I was always jealous of Aaron knowing all these guys' names and then like I'd sit there and just be like, "Durr," you're like, I don't know what to say. Like, what do I do? I don't know what to do with my hands. And so I created FreshBet so I could at least have like some semblance of knowledge and be able to talk it through. But as the years have gone on and I've really paid attention to it and stuck with it, I'm realizing that FreshBeth is actually pretty damn good at hitting some of these like especially the lesser known players, like the lesser loved players, and it and so I'm kind of saying the same thing. Like I want to stick to my guns with Fresh Bet now, whereas before I was just strictly using it more as like, oh well, just so I can talk it through and not sound like an idiot. Now I'm saying, well, no, because I mean, Fresh Beth loved Tory Blaylock, and like I get like the whole season didn't look amazing, but Tory Blaylock went from a basically unknown player to the starter for Oklahoma, Oklahoma. Um, this and that's just an example from this year. Like Jordan Davison was another one, and I know Aaron was basically completely out on Jordan Davison from day one. He was like, he's a plotter, he's just huge, and that's all he is. And but it works the other way as well. Like I was not as high on Deer Hill, but that was because he was listed at 188 pounds. So I need to maybe tweak the running backs to not care as much about the weight right then, because Deer Hill being 188 pounds just completely crushes him. But then if he comes in at 202, next thing you know, he's probably a top five running back for me, or something like that. So that's something that I can work on as well. But I've noticed that there's some of these players that it's hit on, and it's not always the top guys. The top guys are there as well, but it's some of the it's some like the lesser known players that it's hitting on, that I'm like, man, no one else is talking about these players, and so I've kind of just been like, oh well, I'm not going to touch them either. And maybe going forward, I'm like, hey, let's believe in this, because, and I'm not saying it's 100% accurate or anything like that, but everyone fell in love with Eugene Wilson, Trey Wilson going to Florida and all that. He was actually the lowest ranked wide receiver in Fresh Bet that season. Out of let's see, I had 24 receivers ranked, and he was the 24th freshman recruit that I had ranked. And so, but then you had players like, Makai Lemon were really high. Carnell Tate was actually my wide receiver 3 in that class, and people didn't really think that he was going to be anything special. And they had Brandon Ennis over him. They had Zachariah Branch over him, and all these other players. Now it didn't work out, because I also had Jalen Hale at wide receiver 2, but I would have gotten so much more Carnell Tate, in freshman or in supplemental drafts and everything, if I had stuck to these ranks and everything. So I'm going to trust my own process more. That's a resolution of my own. I'm also going to work on it and tweak it, make sure that it's still doing, like I said, with the running backs, work on that kind of stuff. Maybe not rely on freshman weights as much, because obviously that can drastically change. We've seen that happen with a ton of players. So maybe not knock them as much for that, but for the most part, it's actually looking pretty good. And CJ Carr was another one that was just like no one seemed to be talking about for the most part, and yet I think he was QB4 in Fresh Bath. So like if I stuck to my guns with that one, how much CJ Carr would I have in my C2C leagues? And yet I have zero, because like no one seemed to like think that he could be anything, and I was like, oh well, I guess he's terrible, so I'm not going to take him.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point with the weights and some of those running backs. Like they can definitely pack on some pounds, and not that I expect this guy to ever be like a big back by any means, but Gerard Pringle, like underratedly for Miami, had a good season, but I wrote him off completely because of the size thing. And you can go down the list on college running backs who are impressive despite some size concerns. Hollywood Smothers is a guy that we've talked about plenty on the podcast. It's another thing, kind of wrote him off completely because he's just too small. But those high school weights are just notoriously poor. I mean, they're just not accurate, and these guys are growing, right? I mean, they're still trying to hit that peak athleticism and weight and everything that the college weight room can provide. So, anyways, they are not finished products when they're coming in as freshmen, that's for sure. So, no, I think that's good, and I will actually put another New Year's resolution out there for my analysis with the incoming freshmen as well. So, guys coming out of high school, I'll just be a little bit less picky about the film. And I know people are like, what do you mean you have to watch, X amount of games and sift through all these different traits and evaluations? And for folks who are really, really they have the time for it and they're really talented in that field, hey, I say you should probably put that time in because you're getting more out of it. But when I watched some of these guys last year and some of the freshmen coming out from this previous class, I came away a little bit disappointed with some of the guys that I watched and ranked above others this last year. And I don't have all the specific examples up, but I was seeing some guys really flash these awesome traits in high school, and then they're just not getting on the field in college. And so I guess I'm just going to put a little bit more little bit less emphasis on some of that film breakdown for these high school players because we ultimately know they're going to develop and they're going to be put into totally different schemes and styles and different roles at the college level. So I don't want to write off guys. That's I think the biggest thing I was doing. I was writing off some of them, like the Malachi Tonys and other guys like that. Just gadgety. He's not going to be anything. Well, actually, there was a lot of good indicators, including an early enrollee too into college. I think that's an interesting thing I could look at a bit more. But, anyways,
Yeah.
I won't rule out guys because I know they can develop from high school, even if their film at times looks a little bit, if you have some question marks with it ultimately.
And I think that goes to both of our resolutions here because I was kind of forgetting one of the biggest ones. When I first created FreshBath, Cam Coleman was one of my top wide receivers, and I had everyone and their mother who does anything with the recruits telling me, no, he's slow. He's just that big X receiver, but he's slow and he's not anything. He's not going to be anything. And like people telling me like he shouldn't even be your top 12 recruits, much less your top five or top three or whatever. And I lowered Cam Coleman in my ranks because of that. And then, man, I mean, Cam Coleman's a top two wide receiver overall in Devy right now, and I think that kind of goes. I don't know. I don't think you were as like out, but I don't think you were as in on Coleman as I was either. But was there anything to do with his film or anything that you noticed that maybe he was obviously able to work on and do better? Or are we relying too much on high school athleticism and not realizing like they go to these SEC schools or wherever and hit the weight room and next thing you know the 6'4" guy can actually like gain some muscle and gain some speed.
Yeah, no, I do remember liking Cam Coleman a lot. Like, it definitely had him as a top guy coming out, but there were a lot of film questions out there for sure. So you heard that a lot on various scouting reports, podcasts, whatever the case is. Cam Coleman, is he nuanced enough? Is he just some sort of bully ball, deep threat, speed guy with great hands and size? I'm going back to this most recent wide receiver class in particular. And I was kind of lower on Andrew Marsh and Donovan Oligbode. So Andrew Marsh had a really good season at Michigan and Oligbode at Missouri. And I just saw some question marks there, whether it was between their production and or just film ultimately, and started to write them off a little bit. Like Andrew Marsh, he didn't do well in the All-Star game circuits and all that. But there were all the other signs there that he was a good player. And I didn't love the film at times. But you know what? Maybe just putting a little bit too much weight in that and nuking a guy saying he's on my do not draft type of list, that's not smart. Ultimately, so just cleaning up that process a little bit. I think, like you said, we can do better. All of us can always do better, trying to
Well,
identify these guys correctly, and we're always going to have misses too.
yeah. Oh, of course, 100%. I mean, the hit rates with these recruits are insane to begin with. So, I mean, like we're sitting here, like I'm saying how Debbie Beth is doing well. Like she might have a 20% hit rate, or not Debbie Beth, Fresh Beth. Fresh Beth is sitting here with like a 20% hit rate, but that's compared to like a 12% hit rate normally, So like it's actually a substantial difference, but yeah, that's still not perfect. That's not, you're never going to be perfect. Unfortunately, there's just too many variables. I remember how out Fresh Beth was on Micah Hudson. And I mean, maybe he's just a head case, and maybe that's not a fair one because, like, whatever. But I think even just like if he was that good and you're going to Texas Tech, that sh- that should already be a red flag for you, like, and that's kind of the whole like premise of Fresh Path is you're kind of, once again, I try to get as unbiased as possible with this stuff because I do get biased with my player takes and things. And so I like to take that stuff out of it and just say, okay, well, if I'm a completely unbiased person, if I'm a robot, how is it going to look? And the robot is saying, okay, well, these are the schools that are good. If you go to these schools, you're probably going to, you have a higher chance of being good. And I think the sad part is, like, we sit here and we do so much work, whether it's film based analysis, analytical analysis, whatever. And the sad part is, you could probably just say, this player went to this school, therefore I like him. Like, or this player went to this school, therefore I don't like him. And you would probably still be more accurate than the person who's doing all the film grinding and all that, just because, unfortunately, there's so many schools that these players go to where they just have no chance of ever being anything. And then we talked about how transferring hurts you and all that kind of stuff. So even if you say, okay, well, they can transfer, well, yeah, but now you're talking about, you have a wasted year, maybe you have a wasted 2 years after you transfer and try to work your way up or whatever. It hurts them. It hurts their profile when it's all said and done. Whereas if they just go to an Ohio State, or if they go to in Oklahoma, or wherever it is that these teams that have sent, obviously, like USC, has sent so many players. LSU has sent so many players to the NFL. These recruits go to those teams, and you can almost just say they already have a higher chance of making it to the NFL, of being Devy relevant or whatever, and take away everything else that's in their profile.
And I will say too, that's a good place to start looking at these incoming freshmen of like the landing spot, right? That's very important for what could that role look like, or how does their development at that level of competition, whatever the case is, if they have a history of putting out players at that school. It's a good place to start. We definitely have to incorporate more than just that into it, but we know that, right? That's just, like you said, a good starting place at the end of the day. So, yeah, I guess I didn't really have a lot of other thoughts for New Year's resolutions. I do have some guys that I should probably shout out because I went on that spiel about being confident in my analysis on these
Sure.
players and the scouting that goes into it. Who are some guys that I want to stay very optimistic and high on going into this next year? Well, one guy who's going to the NFL, we assume. I don't know if he's actually declared yet, but I think Kenyon Sadiq, tight end, is just guy I'm going to remain optimistic on. We'll see how it shakes out. Dallas Wilson, a wide receiver at Florida, just trusting in the talent there, but there's going to be some ambiguity. He could be like some of the scenarios we laid out here today of like a transfer wide receiver who hasn't fully broken out yet. There's been some injury concerns. There's reason to be off of him, and I'm not saying like he should be a top 5 or 10 Devy wide receiver right now, but the upside is so high with Dallas Wilson. I think Osman Chroma. There's a lot of parallels for me from like a Jeremiah Love to Chroma. And I'm not saying that's what we should expect, but I am saying that if you fade him after a freshman season, which wasn't bad, and there's obviously a lot of upside going back to his high school profile, I think it could be a mistake. So those are a couple of guys off the top of my head that I just want to make sure that I'm staying strong with this offseason. Unless I get news that really is detrimental, right? Then we have to adjust, we have to pivot, or if their player values balloon and inflate to a level where we're like, hey, I think I need to sell on this guy because jump the shark there, it's out of control. Then we can profit off of that too. But yeah, those are some guys. I don't know if you have additional guys or maybe you have another resolution for us, but those are, I guess, my thoughts.
No, I'm pretty good on the resolutions. Like, I think that was the biggest one. I mean, I guess you can almost tie most of our resolutions into stick to your guns, like that kind of thing. A lot of it is just like trust your process, trust yourself, and stick to your guns. Like, going back, you and I kind of had a back and forth throughout the whole offseason about Dallas Wilson and Burnell Brown the third, and I think we're both right. They're both good. It's a little scary. Like, Dallas Wilson's transferring out. It's almost just as scary that Vernell Brown is not transferring out. But at the same time, Eugene Wilson's gone. Dallas Wilson's gone. Like, he should easily be the wide receiver one on that team. when it's all said and done. So it's kind of scary, but at the same time not. But when we were back and forth, and I would have to say I was the highest on Vernell Brown the third. You didn't really hear a lot of people mention him at all, and obviously like it was not a perfect season or anything. The Gators were absolutely terrible, but he at least has to be mentioned. He has to at least be in the thing. And that's another thing of sticking to my guns with Freshbeth is like he was really high up there, and people were like, no, no, he's Eugene Wilson and this. I'm like, Eugene Wilson is terrible. Like why are we gonna be scared of Eugene Wilson? But yeah, we're right at the hour mark. I think we did a great job of putting out some resolutions for ourselves, for the listeners, all that kind of stuff, and obviously mention some names of players that we're excited about, and we're curious to see where they transfer to, and maybe with our new transfer rules, we have to completely cut Dallas Wilson out of our ranks. No. but, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Obviously, it's our last pod of the year, so Aaron, I cannot let you get out of here. There's been a lot of words of wisdom on this pod, but I cannot let you get out of the year 2025 without some words of wisdom for our listeners. What do you have?
I will say, because there were a lot of words there that hopefully were wise from us today on the podcast, but I will say at the end of the day, yes, trusting your work, trusting your process, or the people that you really follow in the community, in the podcasts, articles, whatever the case is, just having sources that you feel confident in, trusting those, and sometimes when something doesn't seem right, then question it, right? Question, because not everybody's perfect. Not every source is going to have a completely perfect hit rate. So when something seems off or questionable, do question that, and yeah, continue to have a lot of fun with the leagues. Unfortunately, we will see many people dropping out of leagues, whether it's Dynasty, C2C, Devy, whatever the case is. You got to do what's good for you, right? Good for your life, your work life, family balance, whatever the case is. But do what makes you happy and continue to enjoy leagues. I find so much fun in fantasy football, in the camaraderie within leagues, and sometimes the banter and otherwise. So have fun with it. Reach out if you guys ever need anything at all. We are here for you for the new year and the times ahead.
Very well said. I got a little choked up there. No, I love the words of wisdom there. I think that's great. Well, we really do appreciate you guys listening. Obviously, as the season ends, as we move into the new year and all, we have so much planned for this off season. This new year, we weren't even with DLF as a podcast last year at this time, so we have an entire off season to really go hard at this and really like take it to another level this year. And I think that's our plan. We're gonna have fun. We're gonna have games like like Guess the Guy. We'll probably bring in incorporate some other games, possibly bring in some guests, try to get some outsider knowledge in as well. But like I said, there's so much going on that we're going to be able to do, and obviously we couldn't do it without you guys listening, without you guys doing it. We saw the end of year numbers, and it was up, up, up. So we love to see that. That was really great to see, and it feels good for us knowing that you guys are listening and appreciating and everything. Obviously, anytime you want to reach out to any of us, let us know if you have thoughts, if you are trying to join a league, if you're trying to, if you need help with this or that or whatever. We're always available on Twitter. Slide into the DMs, let us know, and we will be there for you. In fact, we will be there for you next week when we return, and next year when we return. But for now, we're going to go ahead and cash out. See you guys.